As a child, Ellie always was curious about astronomy and radio signals. She can spend the whole afternoon on the radio contacting different parts of the world, just for fun, keeping all her calls on a map. Her father always supports her, and they often look into space together with a telescope. Ellie dreams of making contact with aliens one day, but sometimes she also wonders if she could also use radio to communicate with her dead mother. Years later, Ellie is a doctor working for the Intelligence Extraterrestrial Research Program, or SETI, at the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico. As during her childhood, she spends hours sitting in front of a radio looking for broadcasts sent by aliens to prove they are real. Her blind coworker, Kent, respects what she does because no one sits down to listen to her anymore. Ellie starts a new map marking all the points in the galaxy she has already marked. One day, while having lunch at a restaurant, Palmer approaches Ellie and questions about the observatory's current work. He is writing a book about how technology affects third-world countries and has a small compass of plastic that he tries to give to Ellie, but she gives it back to him. Palmer gets flirtatious, and they agree to meet on Tuesday. Soon the advisor arrives, President David's scientist, to check the research, but it is clear that he wants to be there. On Tuesday night, they are organizing a party, and David continues explaining how scientific projects should generate profits since they use taxes of people. Ellie tries to explain the importance of scientific research, and Palmer comes out in his defense, only for David to call him father. When Ellie breaks down, she asks Palmer if he is a priest, and he denies it, explaining that he obtained a master's degree in divinity and that now does secular humanitarian work with the support of third-world churches. Ellie is skeptical but still goes with him, and they look at the stars for a while, to which she can share some of the things she knows. He also tells the story of how his father inspired him to become an astronomer. The duo kiss and end up spending the night together. Once finished, they have a philosophical talk about God and science. Palmer really believes in God, but Ellie thinks there must be an explanation for everything. Palmer then asks Ellie about her childhood and learns that her mother died during childbirth and her father when she was 9 years old. Ellie feels uncomfortable and announces that she has to go to work, but tells Palmer to leave her his phone number. As she leaves, she remembers her father's death. When that night she heard a noise and went downstairs to discover that her father had collapsed. She had to run back and look for medicine in upstairs bathroom, but it was too late. Later, during the funeral, a priest explained to her that it had been God's will, but Ellie didn't agree. She thought she should have kept the medicines in the downstairs bathroom. Then she ignored the other people and ran to her radio to see if she is able to communicate with her father and the present. Kent informs Ellie that David shut down her project. Ellie, furious, she rushes to shout at David, who thinks she is wasting her time and that he is saving her career. Then Ellie returns home and finds Palmer's number with the small compass. However, she calls Kent and announces that she will look for investors so that her group can continue her research in New Mexico. 13 months later, after many failed meetings at other companies, Ellie arrives at Haddon Industries to plead her case, but the board dismisses her ideas as science fiction. Ellie explodes and rants, pointing out that all scientific discoveries were science fiction at some point in history. At that time, the board receives a call from CEO Haddon himself, who agrees to fund her research. For years afterwards, Ellie is still in New Mexico working with huge antennas parabolic. One afternoon, Kent arrives with bad news, saying that they are receiving pressure from the scientific community to present results. Haddon is willing to fund the project for years, but the telescopes are owned by the government and they want to lease them to more profitable people. It has been decided that the project will be completed in 3 months. Ellie wants to fight, but Kent thinks it's time to admit defeat. Meanwhile, Palmer published his book and became a spiritual advisor in the White House. It appears on television and explains that he is not against technology, but he believes that people have lost their way because they are obsessed with computers instead of finding meaning in life. Days go by and Ellie never stops listening. One night, she is surprised to hear a pulsating noise. Very excited, she immediately calls her team to give them the coordinates as he runs back to the observatory. The team also gets excited and starts connecting as many machines as possible. While the satellites rotate to get a better signal, they work together to do all the tracking and recording, happily confirming that it came from space exterior. It appears to come from the star Vega, 26 light-years away. This means that it has been traveling for more than 20 years. Suddenly the transmission stops, and Ellie is on the verge of losing hope, but luckily she soon restarts. Ellie realizes that the pulses represent prime numbers, meaning they are not random, and someone sent them specifically. After the team discusses how to proceed, they agree to call everyone in. The next morning, the area is filled with journalists and national security advisors. Team explains that other stations have confirmed their discovery, but the leader of the National Security Council is still not happy that the team has told to the world, rather than keeping the information classified. At least this time David David defends her, explaining that without the help of other stations, they would have lost the signal. With Kent's help, they discover a second signal coming with the first one and connect it to a TV. The team begins to fiddle with the configuration and finally manages to decode the signals into a video message. This is a recording of Hitler's opening speech at the Olympics. This is the first television broadcast that went into space, and aliens have returned it as a greeting. The White House panics, and the president makes an announcement of extraterrestrial contact while trying not to mention Hitler, assuring to journalists that the message is benign. Ellie prepares to speak in public, however. David is called to be the leader of the investigation. Meanwhile, Kent continues to analyze the signal and realizes that it has structure. They gathered all the extra frames that don't belong in the video of the Olympic Games, and they find that they translate into an enormous amounts of data. Soon Ellie makes a presentation about this data, and David announces that the government will take charge of the decryption, which causes Ellie to protest that it has always been hers. White House official Rachel allows Ellie to maintain control of the research, but all progress should always be discussed privately with the government before making any public announcement. Soon the media around the world will be talking of this discovery. Neo-Nazi protesters take to the streets as the number of religious assistants. Health organizations are also concerned that the mass self-elimination can become a big problem because some sects have already begun to die. While everyone on TV starts arguing between science and religion, thousands of people camp outside the facility in New Mexico. Some simply pray, others just watch, but many also protest. Ellie is shocked to see that a shady organization offers UFO abduction insurance. At least the most people are having fun, but she is worried about a religious fanatic named Joseph, who continues to inspire hatred. 3 weeks after the discovery, Ellie returns home to find an email from an unknown sender. The text says, "Take me to your leader," and Ellie responds, "Who are you?" The answer comes quickly saying, "I have a secret," and showing part of the alien message. While Ellie is upset about a possible hacker, he receives a phone call and a fax for arranging a special appointment. Moments later, a helicopter drops Ellie off at the airport, and she gets on a private plane to meet James, the man who funded her research and sent those emails. He lives in that luxury plane and considers Ellie one of his most valuable investments. James plays a video summarizing Ellie's life and accomplishments before revealing that he was also an engineer, which is why he hates how the government and the religion get in the way of science. Then James announces that he has deciphered the data and displays it on the screen, showing that it should be organized into 3 dimensions to understand them. The next day, Ellie presents this discovery to the government, explaining that the data contain blueprints for some kind of machine. Since they don't know what the machine is for, a discussion ensues as to whether to build it or not, as it could be dangerous. The topic of God keeps coming up, and Ellie is surprised to see Palmer arrive, and says that they should find a middle ground. The discussion is interrupted by the arrival of the president, who listens to everyone. A party is organized in the evening to celebrate this progress, and many protesters gather outside, including Joseph. They ask the scientists to get a real job, and instead of wasting tax money, Ellie meets up with Palmer, and they have another philosophical discussion. She explains that she needs proof of things, and Palmer asks her to prove that she loved her father, which leaves her speechless. At that moment, they are interrupted by a big news that was leaked on television. The machine has been discovered to be a one-person spacecraft. A celebration is held emergency meeting at the White House, and they agree to build the machine so the president will reach out to other nations to share the risk and cost. Forms a selection committee, and Palmer is on it. They will interview a group of candidates to decide who will travel on the machine. To Ellie's surprise, David resigns as scientific advisor so he can also be a candidate. Soon the media starts discussing how much this whole project will cost the country and who is worth making such a journey. There is a lot of controversy surrounding the final 10 candidates because a third of them are Americans, and Japan does not offer anyone as a volunteer in exchange for a systems integration subcontract. Ellie appears on television saying that the traveler must understand the language of the message, and she does not believe that aliens are sent something that doesn't work, so it shouldn't be dangerous. Later, Ellie meets with Palmer and explains that due to the dilation of the time, the person will only spend 4 years on the ship, but 50 years will have passed on Earth. She believes the sacrifice is worth it if it means finding answers so important, and they end up kissing again. On the day of the candidate interviews, Ellie is doing incredibly well, and the committee is ready to wrap up. However, Palmer steps in to ask her about her atheism, which makes her embarrass herself in front of everyone. In the end, David is the chosen one. At night, Palmer visits Ellie to explain to her that he can't choose someone who thinks most of the world is deceived, so Ellie, crying, gives him back the compass and gets him out of the house. The machine is built at the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, and their crowds are also beginning to gather. Many tests are being carried out using a robot to detect any side effects for the passenger. On the day of the launch, Ellie attends the event, and David David tells him that he wishes his idealism had been enough, but unfortunately, the world works with a system of earnings. Ellie then joins the team in the control room and watches excitedly as it is activated. The spacecraft, whose rings rotate around it like a kind of accelerator. As final tests are being performed, Ellie looks at the monitor and notices Joseph getting passed by a worker near the ship. She immediately warns David and everyone else. They rush to take down Joseph, but it's too late. He activates a bomb, and a huge explosion brings down the tower. As the crowd enters, panics and flees, the falling pieces destroy the ship and kill a group of workers. Sometime later, the authorities hold a funeral worthy of the fallen, while the news shows the farewell video left by Joseph, in which he says he did it for the good of humanity. When Ellie returns home, she discovers some machines waiting for her in her room. He presses a key, and a video call begins, revealing Hayden at the station. He lives there because he is dying of cancer and wants to spend his last days in space. He zooms in with a camera on the island of Hokkaido, surprising Ellie with a second ship built by Japan. The company that won the contract is a subsidiary of Haddon and did all this in secret. Eli immediately travels to Japan on Haddon's private plane and meets up with the team on a large ship. They teach her everything she needs to know about the trip and share precautions of safety equipment, including a container with poison. It has been given to astronauts during years in case they need to self-eliminate because they could get stuck floating in space after a ship failure. At night, Palmer visits Ellie and gives her the compass, confessing that in reality, he did not vote for her because he did not want to lose her. Soon the media announces that there is a second machine, but they are not allowed to visit. On launch day, Ellie gets nervous seeing all the rings spinning, but moving forward anyway. The technicians make all the connections to their suit, and they put a camera on their head to record the entire trip. Palmer uses his contacts to lure Kent out so he can give Ellie a good luck message before takeoff. The ship begins to vibrate, which is normal, but Ellie also notices a strange light. She tries to record it for the team, but the footage is static. She theorizes that it must be some electromagnetic field and is shocked to see that the ship becomes transparent. The countdown begins, and the team is worried, especially when the ship starts to glow and all the numbers on the computers are off limits. They consider aborting the mission, however. Kent hears Ellie's voice through the static, swearing that she's ready to go. The sea begins to go crazy in the area and shakes the ship just before the ship finally takes off. Ellie is amazed by the lights surrounding her, which quickly become the most amazing and beautiful celestial sights. This soon turns into a tunnel, and Ellie theorizes that it is a wormhole, describing the entire experience for the camera, even though it can no longer communicate with the control land. After crossing what appears to be residual radiation, the ship stops and Ellie sees Vega. Looking around, it reveals a strange contraption nearby, only for the ship to suddenly take off again. Now Ellie flies through a series of wormholes, which still has a strange effect on her face. Eventually, it stops at another star system, and Ellie notices a city on a planet. She barely manages to see anything else before the ship enters a much larger wormhole, more violent, and the compass begins to float, so Ellie leaves the chair to catch it. At that moment, the chair comes loose and hits the ceiling before the lights go out. Ellie turns on her flashlight and discovers a celestial event that she can't identify. Incredibly moved by the beauty, and says that she should have been sent to a poet to describe it. Suddenly, she finds herself floating and appears on a beach. This place is also beautiful, and it looks like a drawing she made when she was a child. At that moment, a figure begins to run towards her, and Ellie is surprised to see her father, but as soon as she hugs him, she realizes that he is not real. This is an alien, who explains that he took this form to communicate more easily with her. It confirms that there are many alien races, and that humans first contacted the universe with their radio transmissions. The travel system that Ellie used was not built by her people, but by an unknown entity. The aliens observed the humans and agreed that they were worthy, so they sent them the plans as a first step for humanity to join the rest of the universe. After saying goodbye, Ellie watches a beautiful meteor shower in the sky. Suddenly, a light shines too brightly, and Ellie finds herself back on the ship, which is landed in the Japanese Sea. The team panics and contacts Ellie, telling her there was a malfunction and that the ship never left. After Ellie is rescued, she shares all her experience, but the camera only recorded static. She swears that it is all true, however. Kit shows her a recording of the ship falling in seconds. The next day, the president gives a speech saying that this is just a misstep, but soon the other nations become involved in legal disputes. The media communications are full of criticism and conspiracy theories, especially when Kit resigns from his advisory position. Then a congressional committee led by Kit questions Ellie, who points out that a wormhole may explain what happened. Time dilation could have made 1 second on Earth equivalent to 18 hours in space. Kit immediately draws attention to the wormhole, which is just a theory, and drops a big bomb. Haddon is dead, and it is believed that this whole affair was a hoax organized by him. Ellie cries as she begs people to believe her story, surprising like herself who doesn't believe without a proof, and asks people to have faith about wonder, humility, and hope, since she has no proof. This inspires Palmer, but the committee concludes that her story is also a deception. As they leave, Palmer joins Ellie in front of the cameras and a large crowd and tells the world who believes him. Meanwhile, secretly, Rachel tells Kits that Ellie's camera recorded 18 hours of static. 18 months later, Ellie is working on a new base with additional radars, as she has got sufficient funding to continue. The children visit the base during school trips, and Ellie teaches them that they must look for their own answers.